March the 21st, 2025. Guys, I want to talk about this new finding under the pyramids in Giza. I think that I had a feeling, let me back up just a moment. I had a feeling that something in the back of my head was starting to ring a little bell. Some of you guys that have been with me maybe 12 years ago, I did a full series of the Anunnaki, the Sumerian text translations, and I used different translators, and I really like the flow of the Zechariah Sitchin series because it's starting to make more and more sense. And let me say this, guys, this discovery changes everything about religion and wars. That's why it's been put down. No one's wanted to talk about it. That's why the Bible was held in Latin for so long, and all of the stuff changed. They did not want us to know what was about to come upon this earth and what would make men's hearts fail them. They did not want to admit that there are other powers much stronger than them, or at least as strong. And I've talked about the pantheon of gods, guys, that existed. God was in heaven. He said, let us, as he was in his council, make men in our image. Who do you think he was talking to? Now that we're getting physical evidence of what was talked about as the Pyramid Wars, both 1 and 2, it's starting to make sense. All of that is true, in my opinion, and now I think we have the proof. So what I want to do is read just a little bit from this, and I think we're going to hit some high points, and I think we are on the right track of what we're finding out, and it is absolutely amazing. It says, in the year 363, His Majesty Ra, the Holy One, the Falcon of the Horizon, the immortal who forever lives, was in the land of Canaan. He was accompanied by his warriors, for the enemies had conspired against their lord. Horus, the winged measurer, came to the boat of Ra. He said to his forefather, O Falcon of the Horizon, I have seen the enemy conspiring against thy lordship to trade the luminous crown unto themselves. They wanted to take it, guys. Then Ra, the Holy One, the Falcon of the Horizon. How many falcons have you seen depicted in Egyptian art, or falcon-headed people? He said unto Horus, the winged measurer, lofty issue of Ra, my begotten, go quickly, knock down the enemy whom you have seen. Thus began the tale inscribed on the temple walls in the ancient Egyptian city of Edfu. It is the tale, we believe, of what could only be called the First Pyramid War, a war that had its roots in the never-ending struggle, does that sound familiar, for control over Earth and its space facilities, and in the shenanigans of the great Anunnaki, especially Enki, who, by the way, was the one that warned about the flood, and his son Ra, or also called Marduk. Marduk was very important, as well as some of the female demigods and goddesses that were called, what people call them on Earth. And guys, it's all coming together. We talked about the landing places in Syria and Lebanon, these huge stones that were put there, and what they looked like to me and what was described back then was they were spaceports. They were landing areas that with huge blocks that could handle a tremendous amount of weight. Later the Romans and the Greeks built upon those, and you can still see those standing. But the bottom is huge monolithic stones that man would have a lot of trouble moving by itself. Anyway, the spaceport, the landing zone, guys, we've talked about it too many times, of the fallen angels, along the Sinai Peninsula where the spaceport was established and the Giza pyramids were supposed to remain neutral under the aegis of Ninhursag. It is doubtful whether the builders of this facility, Enki and his descendants, again, Enki warned of the flood. Enlil wanted to destroy mankind, but Enki, remember the K, I as in king, he wanted to save mankind. And It is doubtful whether the builders of these facilities, Enki and his descendants, had really any intentions of relinquishing control over these installations. We're talking about the pyramids, and the battles were over who was going to control the technology, guys. A Sumerian text which begins with an idyllic description has been named by scholars as a paradise myth. Its ancient name was Enki and Nahantag, and it is, in fact, a tale of a deal between Enki and his half-sister Nahantag pertaining to the control of Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula, and of the pyramids and the spaceports. Again, guys, the landing zone. And this is just a picture of it, guys, but this is Baalbek in Lebanon. And look at these bottom stones right here. This was the original landing spot. A lot of people say Mount Hermon. This is very close, but this was designated as a landing spot, and that's why you see these giant stones on the bottom that were the landing pad, and then later civilizations built upon these walls. That's how big and powerful this civilization was. This all occurred after Earth was apportioned between the Anunnaki, or the lesser gods, with Tillman, the Sinai Peninsula, granted to Ninharsag, and Egypt was Enki's clan. Where were the pyramids? Why did Enki not want that place flooded? He wanted to save the people too. But when we're dealing with this type of situation, guys, the different land sections of the planet were appointed to the different lesser gods. Again, you got Enki and Egypt, but who was who was Israel's God, appointed God? It was Yahweh. He was one of those. That's why it's so important to understand that the God of Israel is there. That's Yahweh. But El in the Old Testament was not Yahweh. Elyon. He was the creator of all. Okay, he was not one of the appointed gods of earth. He was the God of the universe, plural. It says, why had Seth, to whom Upper Egypt had been allotted by Geb, coveted Lower Egypt, which was granted to Osiris. Egyptologists have offered explanations in terms of geography, the land's fertility, etc. But as we have shown, there was one more factor, one that from the gods' point of view, again, the lesser gods, was more important than how many crops a region can grow. And it was the Great Pyramid and its companions at Giza. Listen, whoever controlled them shared the control of the space activities, of the coming and going of the gods, of the vital supply link to and from the 12th planet. In other words, what we're seeing under the pyramids on Giza right now is this. There was so much, the technology had been focused in that area of the planet that it was like fighting over gold mines, or even more than that, nuclear chemicals to make, atomic bombs and things like that, and even more powerful. But anyway, the battles were over this section, the Giza pyramids, and now we're starting to see why. Now, when he mentions the coming and going of the gods, is that a portal? Or the vital supply link to and from the 12th planet? They said they came from the stars. In the year 366, following the disappearance of Osiris, the young Horus became the avenger of his father and launched a war against Seth. The first pyramid war, that's what it was called. It was, as we have seen, also the first war in which gods involved men in their struggles. That has not stopped to this day. Look at Ukraine. Now, supported by other Enki gods, again, Enki wanted to save mankind. Reigning in Africa, the Avenger Horus began the hostilities in Upper Egypt. Aided by the winged disc that Thoth had fashioned for him, Horus persistently advanced northward toward the pyramids. These are UFOs, these winged discs, coming into battle. After fierce battles, Horus became victorious, with Seth hiding in one battle and being seriously wounded in another. So the Council of the Gods gave the whole of Egypt as heritage to Horus, and what had become of Seth, one of the 8 gods descended from Ptah. Now Seth, which is also an Old Testament name going back to Genesis, he was banished from Egypt and took abode in Asiatic lands to the east, kind of like Cain. Remember, cast to the lands of the east, including a place that enabled him to speak out from the sky. Was he the god called Enshag in the Sumerian tale of Enki and Naharsag, the one to whom Tilman, the Sinai Peninsula, was allotted by the 2 love-makers? If so, then he was the Egyptian Hamatic, who had extended his domain over the land of Shem, later known as Canaan. It was in this outcome of the first pyramid war that there lies an understanding of biblical tales. Therein lays the cause of the second pyramid war. 2. In addition to the spaceport and the guidance facilities, why do you think all that technology was there, guys? There was also a need after the deluge for a new mission control center, just like we would have to do now if a tsunami came into Cape Canaveral. It was to replace the one that had existed before in Nippur. We have shown in the Stairway to Heaven that the need to equidistance this center from the other space-related facilities dictated its locating on Mount Moriah, the mount of directing the site of the future city of Jerusalem. Now that puts a whole different aspect on what Christ said when he said that those that be in Jerusalem, claiming to be Jews, but are not, and are the synagogue of Satan. And that site, by both Mesopotamian and biblical accounts, was located in the lands of Shem, a dominion of the Enlites. Now, that's Enlilites. That's the one that had enough of the human race. It was grown too big and too noisy, and he was going to flood the earth and drowned everybody. And Enki stepped in and warned about it, and so we went from there. There's really several different tales around the planet of great floods at different times. Some were the same, some were in the same place, but at different times. Maybe 3 possible great floods can be talked about. Now, that site, we're talking about Jerusalem, by both Mesopotamian and biblical accounts, was located in the lands of Shem, a dominion of the Enlites, or Enlilites, guys, the one that was who wanted the earth flooded. Yet it ended up under an illegal occupation by the line of Enki, the Hamatic gods, and by the descendants of the Hamatic Canaan. The tale in the book of Genesis leaves many aspects unexplained. Why was Canaan accused if it was his father who accidentally transgressed? Why was his punishment to be a slave of Shem and to the god of Shem? And how were the gods involved in the crime and its punishment? As one reads the supplemental information in the ex-biblical Book of Jubilees, it becomes clear that the real difference was the illegal occupation of Shem's territory. Thus, we start seeing these pyramid wars. Now, Seth's trespass into Canaan meant that all the space-related sites, Giza, the Sinai Peninsula, Jerusalem, don't forget about Baalbad, came under the control of the Enki gods. It was a development in which the Enlilites could not acquiesce, and so soon thereafter, 300 years later, we believe, they deliberately launched a war to dislodge the illegal occupiers from the vital space facilities. Think about that, guys. We are starting to see the real history of the planet, and it's going to open up the eyes of many, and maybe what we're seeing now as God unveils these things is that some people will wake up to where their hearts do not fail them when they see what's coming upon this planet. The second pyramid war is described in several texts, some found in the original Sumerian, others in Akkadian and Assyrian readings or renderings. Scholars refer to these texts as the myths of Ker, myths of the mountain lands. They are, in fact, poetically rendered chronicles of the war to control the space-related peaks, Mount Moriah, the Harsag, which is Mount St. Catherine in the Sinai, and the artificial mount in Urker, called the Great Pyramid in Egypt. The Hamatic gods were beaten there, but they retreated to continue the war from the mountain lands of Africa. They had to move south. Ninurta rose to the challenge. In this final phase, the war was fought at the Great Pyramid, the last and impregnable stronghold of Ninurta's opponents. There the Hamitic gods were besieged until they ran out of food and water. Now, this war, which was called the Second Pyramid War, was commemorated extensively in the Sumerian records, both written chronicles and pictorial depictions. King, I'm going to read it. King, the glory of the day is lordly. Ninurta, foremost possessor of the divine powers, who into the throes of the mountain land stepped forward like a flood which cannot be stopped. The enemy land, as with a girdle you're tightly bound. Foremost one who is in battle vehemently enters. Hero who is in hand, the divine brilliant weapon carries. This brilliant weapon has a lot to do with what we're talking about. Ninurta, royal son, whose father to him had given might. Hero, in fear of thee, the city has surrendered. O mighty one, the great serpent, the heroic god. Who are we talking about there, guys? Think about it. We're talking about serpents on one hand, divine powers, Enlil, Enki, wanting to save mankind, one wanting to destroy it. It's starting to come together, and if you will open your mind, I think you will start to see, especially as we get more information from beneath these pyramids, what really happened. Just bear with me a few more moments. Again, hero, in fear of thee, the city has surrendered. O mighty one, the great serpent, the heroic god, you tore away from all the mountains. Now, this is extolling Ninurta, his feats, and his brilliant weapon. The poem also describes the location of the conflict, the mountain lands, and his principal enemy, the great serpent, leader of the Egyptian deities. The Sumerian poem identifies this adversary several times as Azag, and once refers to him as Ashur. Both well-known epithets for Marduk. Marduk was a big player in these wars, thereby establishing the two principal sons of Enlil and Enki, Ninurta and Marduk, as the leaders of the opposing camps in the Second Pyramid War. Generations move up and take over. Ninurta had built a ship for himself after his original one had been destroyed in an accident. It was called Imdugud, usually translated Divine Storm Bird. Mothership, but which literally means that which like heroic storms rule. We know from various texts that its wingspan was about 75 feet. We're getting real now, guys. It continues, it says, archaic drawings depicted this machine as a mechanically constructed bird with two wing surfaces supported by cross beams. An undercarriage reveals a series of round openings, perhaps air intakes for jet engines. This aircraft from millennia ago bears a remarkable resemblance not only to the early biplanes of the modern air age, but also an incredible likeness to the sketch made in 1497 by Leonardo da Vinci, depicting his concept of man-powered flying machines. People were selected. Were they born with the power, or were they selected? We don't know for sure, but certain people come along throughout history that somehow are handed or somehow mentally passed technology. They have acquired that, and now we're seeing it again. The greatest technology that we've seen since the days that we're reading about now is happening now. And there's someone here that's very intelligent, very rich. Just saying. It says the Imdugud, which was the craft, was the inspiration of Ninurta's emblem. A heroic lion-headed bird rested on two lions, or sometimes on two bulls. It was in this crafted ship, a manufactured vehicle, that which in wars destroyed the princely abodes, that Ninurta soared into the skies during the battle of the Second Pyramid War. Here we go. Now it says Ishtar was also involved in this war, in the clash of weapons, in the feats of heroship. Ishtar, her arm did not hold back. As the two leading gods saw her, they shouted, encouraging her, Advance hither without stopping. Put your foot firmly on the earth. In the mountains we await thee. The partial verses suggest that after the intensified attack with Ishtar's assistance, there arose a great cry and a lamentation in the enemy land. Fear of Ninurta's brilliance encompassed the land. That was his weapon. And their residents had to use subsidies instead of wheat and barley to grind and mill as flour. They scorched the earth and made the rivers run red with blood of the innocent bystanders, the men and the women and the children of the Abzu. They were the human population. Those who survived the attack on the city escaped to the surrounding mountains, but Ninurta, with the weapon that smites, threw fire upon the mountains, the godly weapon of the gods, whose tooth is bitter, smote down the people. High-tech weapons, guys. Very high-tech and very dangerous. Now, overwhelmed by the merciless onslaught, Azag called on his followers to show no resistance. In other words, Enki's side that had the pyramids said, let's back off, just like in a lot of battle scenes you'll see or hear about in history. Let's fake a retreat. That's what they did. Again, asked his followers to show no resistance. Ninurta took the lack of resistance as a sign of victory. They thought they had won, but the claim of victory was premature. By his non-resistance tactics, Azag had escaped defeat. The capital city was indeed destroyed, but not so the leaders of the enemy. Soberly, the text Lugal observed, the scorpion of Kurt Nanuto did not annihilate. Instead of the enemy gods retreated into the Great Pyramid. Are you listening? Where the wise craftsman, Enki, possibly Thal, of the Emerald Tablets, raised up, listen, you want to know about these energy sources under the pyramids? You had that and you had a lot of crystals. Anyway, they raised up a protective wall, which the brilliance could not match. So bright, you could not look at it. Like lasers, but it was a force field, a shield through which the death rays could not penetrate. That's the weapons from the mountains, and the attack on the pyramids themselves. Again, why did they need that power source? And I think that was just one of the reasons for these 2,000-foot deep, cylinders beneath them. Now, let's stay with the Enki side a minute. Nergal. As Nergal joined the defenders of the Great Pyramid, called the formidable house which is raised like a heap, he strengthened his defenses through the various ray-emitting crystals, mineral stones positioned within the pyramid. Does it remind you of Atlantis? With the pyramid's defenses thus enhanced, Ninurta resorted to another tactic. He called upon Utu Shamash to cut off the pyramid's water supply by tampering with the watery stream that ran near its foundations, either the Nile or a tributary stream of the Nile. The besieged gods, again, could not go out and gather wheat, things like that. They had to make food out of whatever they had. The besieged gods did their best to ward off the attackers. Now, one of the younger gods, Horus, we believe, trying to sneak out of the Great Pyramid, disguised as a ram, was struck by Ninurta's brilliant weapon and lost the sight of his eyes. An olden god then cried to Ninhursag, reputed for her medical wonders, to save the young god's life. It was then, responding to the outcry, that Ninhursag decided to intervene to stop the fighting. Ninhursag was the mother of Enlil and Enki. She got in the middle of a ferocious battle and said enough is enough. Now it goes to the 9th tablet, and it begins with her statement. Her address to the Enlilite commander, that's Enlil, her own son, Ninurta, the son of Enlil, the legitimate heir whom the sister wife had brought forth. To the house where cord measuring begins, where Asar, his eyes to Anu raised. Anu is a very interesting name, guys. It has a king number. And the Anu, or the Anunnaki's number 6. Anu's number 66, and Adad It's number 666 in the Sumerian king line. Now again, to the house where chord measuring begins. Guys, the house where chord measuring is the Great Pyramid. Where Asher her eyes to Anu raised, I shall go, the cord I will cut off, for the sake of the warring gods. Her destination was the house where chord measuring begins, again, the Great Pyramid. And Ninurta was at first astonished that his mother wanted to enter alone into what they call the enemy land, the pyramids. But since her mind was made up, he provided her with clothes that should make her unafraid of the radiation left by the beams. As she neared the pyramid, she addressed Enki, the son that warned of the flood. She shouts to him, she beseeches him. The exchanges are lost by the breaks in the tablet, the Sumerian tablets, but Enki agreed to surrender the pyramid to her. The house that is like a heap, that which I have as a pile raised up, its mistress you may be. There was, however, a condition. The surrender was subject to a final resolution of the conflict until the destiny-determining time shall come. Promising to relay Enki's conditions, then Harsag went to address her other son, Enlil. Now, asserting that she was acting with the approval of Anu, Ninhursag took the surrender of Enki to Enlil. She met him in the presence of Adad. There's 666. That's why I mentioned it earlier. Same as Apollyon. While Ninurta remained at the battlefield. If she wants to bring about a cessation of hostilities, Adad said, let her call discussions on the basis that the Enlilites are about to win. In other words, the other god, not Enki, not the one that wanted to save humanity. The other one wanted to declare victory. If we're going to do this meeting, it's kind of like Russia and Crimea, except much more powerful. We're going to have to say Russia wins, or whoever's the bad guy, right? But Adad, again, 666, I did a video in 2013. I think that I was just talking as I took a break earlier to Tina, and we were mentioning when I did the Sumerian text, the entire books, and that was 2012. So it's been a minute, 15 years. Anyway, Adad and Enlil wanted Enki to attend the discussions as well. So you got to bring him out. You got to get him, and of course they had been surrounded. They had powerful weapons. They didn't have much food, and their mother got involved. So they sent Ninhursag to fetch him. Assurance for his and her son's safety was obtained. She conducted him, Enki, and the other defenders of the Great Pyramid to the Harsag, her abode. Ninurta and his warriors watched the Enkites depart, and of course, like any movie, and the great impregnable structure stood unoccupied, silent. This article continues. It says, now the visitors to the Great Pyramid find its passages and chambers bare and empty, its complex inner construction apparently purposeless, its niches and nooks meaningless. It appears that way to the eye of the top of the pyramid, guys, but there's a reason for that. It has been so ever since the first men had entered the pyramid, but it was not so when the Ninurta entered it. This was circa 8670 BC, according to some of the tablets. Now, a lot of this goes back for much longer than that. But unto the radiant place yielded by its defenders, that was Enki, they surrendered. Ninurta had entered, the Sumerian text relates, and what he had done after he entered changed the Great Pyramid, not only from within and without, but also the course of human affairs. When for the first time ever he went into the house, which is like a mountain, he must have wondered what he would find inside, conceived by Enki, Ptah, planned by Ra and Marduk, built by Geb, equipped by Thoth of the Emerald Tablets, defended by Nergal. What mysteries of space guidance, what secrets of impregnable defense did he hold?